It began with a storm that didn't move for 3 days. Thunder rolled endlessly over the Caldwell Ridge, trapped in the hollows like a voice echoing inside bone. The rain soaked the ground to red clay, carving thin rivers down the slopes, revealing old shapes that had been buried for generations. Stones in deliberate circles, a rusted handbell, fragments of jars filled with something that looked like black salt. Eleanor Briggs saw them first. She was 29, a cultural anthropologist out of Marshall University, tracing the oral legends of lost Appalachian sects for her thesis. The Caldwells were supposed to be one of those vanished families, an early 19th clan said to have vanished after the coal company tried to buy their land in 1912. There was no record of what happened after that, only one surviving line in a mining foreman's journal. The Caldwells went down with the mountain. We sealed what we found. The ridge itself wasn't marked on any modern map. Locals in Fair Hollow told her it had been renamed, folded into parkland, but they avoided saying its old name. When she pressed, an older woman behind the counter of the diner muttered, "Some places ain't meant to be remembered. They breathe better in silence." Still, Eleanor drove east that afternoon, her rental car climbing switchbacks slick with rain. Fog draped across the road in ribbons. She kept the window cracked for air and smelled something faint but unmistakable iron, like rusted nails and wet pennies. The GPS died at the first bend. She didn't care. Curiosity was stronger than caution, and in her chest there was that pulse every field researcher knows. The feeling that you're about to touch something no one's documented before. Halfway up the ridge, she found the house, or what was left of it. A 2-story farmhouse collapsed into itself. The porch tilted, the front door hanging open. Ivy had consumed most of the siding. A weather vane spun soundlessly on the roof, though there was no wind. She parked and stepped out. The forest behind the house was too quiet. No insects, no birds. The sound of the rain vanished the moment she crossed the threshold. The air felt thick, charged. Her flashlight beam caught rows of symbols etched into the wood of the walls, spirals, crosses, and what looked like concentric eyes carved with obsessive repetition. On the floor sat a box, half buried under debris. She brushed off the dust. Inside were notebooks, 5 of them, tied with a cord. The pages were soaked and brittle, but she could still make out the writing. Journal of Isaiah Caldwell, 1908. She read the first line aloud. The mountain has a voice. It comes through the stone, through the marrow. We are its tongue. The words crawled under her skin. Eleanor spent the night in the car. Rain hammered the roof. Lightning flashed through the fog. And every so often she thought she heard a sound beneath the thunder, a low, steady rhythm like something exhaling through the earth. At dawn she returned to the farmhouse to gather the rest of the journals. They smelled of soil and ash. She packed them carefully, meaning to take them back to the motel for scanning, but one of the books slipped from her hands and fell open. The last few pages were written in a different ink, darker, almost reddish-brown. "We have begun the offering," it read. "The ridge grows restless. We hear it in our sleep, in the cracking of the timbers. The youngest hear it the loudest. The voice calls them by name." Her phone, lying on the windowsill, buzzed once. No signal, just the recorder app she'd left open. The waveform was moving, though she wasn't speaking. She hit play. A low sound filled the air, not static, but something like breath drawn through 1,000 throats at once. Then, faintly, a whisper, "Eleanor." The air in the room went cold. She shut the journal and backed away. Her flashlight flickered. Every carved eye on the walls seemed to have shifted slightly, not enough to notice all at once, but enough to feel it. She fled outside. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hadn't moved. Time felt heavy, stretched. The forest was dense, each tree trunk black with water. She started down the slope toward her car, but halfway there, the trail bent and the car was gone. The road, to only forest. Her compass spun uselessly. Then she saw the smoke, thin gray, rising between the trees ahead. She followed it cautiously, calling out, "Hello, anyone there?" No answer, but the smell of wood smoke grew stronger. She stepped into a clearing and froze. A group of people stood around a fire, their backs to her. They wore simple clothing, homespun, some barefoot, their hair the color of clay dust. None of them turned when she approached. They were humming, a low, wordless tone that pulsed in the air like the vibration of a stringed instrument. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm looking for—" The humming stopped. One of them, a woman with pale eyes, turned slowly. Her face was calm, expressionless, but her pupils were wide and reflective, like an animal's in the dark. "You shouldn't have read the name," she said. "What name? The one that listens back?" The others began to hum again, softer now, in a pattern that almost sounded like breathing. The ground beneath Eleanor's boots trembled faintly. "Is this Caldwell Ridge?" she asked. The woman smiled. "It still is. It always will be." Something moved behind the fire, a shape in the smoke, darker than the night itself. She blinked, and it was gone, but the sound remained, a deep, slow heartbeat coming from the soil. "You feel it now?" the woman whispered. "It remembers you." Eleanor stumbled backward, heart racing. "What is it?" "The vein," the woman said. "The ridge feeds on what the earth forgets, and you've just reminded it." The ground cracked open a few feet away. Warm air rose through the fissure, carrying a scent that was both sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in the sun. The humming swelled until the sound filled her head. The last thing she saw, before everything went black, was the firelight, bending, curving toward the hole, as if being pulled by breath. When she woke, she was lying on her back in the farmhouse again. The journals were gone. The door had been repaired. Outside, morning light filtered through the fog. Her car sat exactly where she'd left it. Her phone blinked with a new recording. She pressed play. Her own voice came through, calm and slow, reciting words she didn't remember speaking. "The ridge has veins like ours. It sleeps in the roots, and it dreams in names. I am its echo." Then silence. The air smelled of iron again. She looked down and realized her palms were stained red, not with blood, but with clay. It pulsed faintly, as though still alive. She didn't go back to the motel. Instead, she drove until night fell, until the forest thinned, until the mountains disappeared behind her. She told herself she'd return with a full team, proper recording equipment, a clear plan. But deep down she knew she wouldn't, because the sound had followed her faint, rhythmic, somewhere just below hearing. And when she finally stopped for gas 2 towns away, the radio turned itself on. A whisper, soft and steady. "The ridge remembers." The dream returned the night after the first excavation. Mara woke drenched in sweat, the echo of whispering still sliding through her skull, like static underwater. She could never remember the words, only the rhythm, a low pulse that felt too steady to be imagination. She wrote it down in her field log. 4 beats, silence, 2 beats. When she tapped it against the wall of her tent, the ground answered back. Morning came heavy. The fog hadn't lifted from the ridge, and the air smelled faintly metallic, like old blood and wet stone. Her assistant, Jonah, had already started the generator, but the lights kept flickering as if something beneath the soil drained power straight from the lines. "Doc, you didn't sleep again, did you?" he asked. Mara shook her head, crouching near the open dig site. The rock layer exposed the day before wasn't rock at all. It was some kind of fused mineral, smooth and glassy, crisscrossed with hairline fissures that pulsed faintly when touched. "Watch," she said. She pressed her palm against the surface. A faint tremor rippled through the ground, spreading out in circles. Jonah stepped back. "Feels alive." "That's the word I didn't want to use," Mara whispered. By noon, the first anomaly occurred. Their instruments started to pick up radio interference, not static, but fragments of human speech. Broken syllables, like an old recording tangled in the signal, one line repeated every few minutes. Distorted and stretched until it bled through the metal speakers. The earth remembers its debt. Jonah killed the power. But the voice kept talking. Mara leaned closer to the field recorder. The noise wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. It was coming from under the ground. That night, she sat alone by the fire, staring at the open trench. The reflection of the flames glowed on the strange mineral vein, and for a moment it looked like veins inside a body. Light traveling through them in soft waves. She pulled out her grandfather's notebook. He'd written about the Caldwells not as a family, but as a line, a generational vow that stretched back before the Civil War. The last entry was scrawled in a shaking hand. The vein feeds. It takes shape when the hill goes quiet. Don't let it sing. The fire popped. Something moved in the dark. Jonah's tent rustled. Doc, she turned. He was standing at the entrance, flashlight trembling in his hand. His pupils were wide, face pale as paper. What is it? I heard someone say my name, he whispered. Sounded like my mother. Mara stood, scanning the tree line. The night was black, but the air shimmered faintly, like heat distortion, though the temperature had dropped nearly 20 degrees. Then she saw them, shapes, not quite human, standing at the edge of the clearing. Too tall, too still. Stay back, Mara hissed. But Jonah was already walking toward them, slow and entranced. The light from his flashlight bent as it touched the figures. Warping like reflection on water, she ran forward, grabbed his arm, and the shapes vanished. The trees stood motionless again. The only sound, the crackling of fire and the thump of her heart. Jonah blinked, confused. They were right there. I know, she said softly. I think they still are. The next morning, Jonah was gone. His tent was undisturbed, his gear still zipped inside. Only his boots were missing, and in the mud near the trench. A single set of footprints led toward the pit, then stopped at the edge. Mara leaned over the rim. The mineral layer below had cracked open overnight. Faint warmth rose from it, along with the sound, the same pulsing rhythm from her dreams. 4 beats. Silence. 2 beats. She lowered a mic into the fissure. The recorder shook violently, the signal peaking into red static, and through it, a whisper. Come down where the blood remembers. Her breath caught. The phrase matched a note in her grandfather's log, a local legend, never verified. A hidden cavern system called the Hollow Below, where early settlers claimed to hear voices teaching them how to survive the famine. No one who followed the sound ever returned. That night, she couldn't resist. She followed the sound. The forest seemed to open around her, the trees leaning away as if afraid. She carried nothing but a lantern and her recorder. The rhythm guided her like a heartbeat, pulsing through the soil. Half a mile from camp, she found an old mine entrance, sealed by rusted beams. Her lantern light reflected off the same glassy stone buried in the trench. Someone had carved symbols around the entrance, circles intersecting with veins, spirals connecting to a single point. She traced them with her fingers, and the stone beneath warmed to her touch. The rhythm grew louder. She pushed the beam aside and crawled in. The tunnel air was damp, metallic. The walls shimmered faintly with the same living mineral. As she moved deeper, she realized it wasn't rock at all. It was bone fused with clay, forming a single pulsing mass. She aimed her recorder ahead. October 12th. Subsurface chamber discovery. No sign of Jonah. The material appears. The ground shook. A low hum filled the tunnel, vibrating through her teeth. Then, a voice soft and wet, whispered right beside her ear. You carry the mark. You woke us. Her lantern flickered out. In the darkness, faint glows appeared ahead, thousands of small lights embedded in the wall, like eyes. She stumbled backward, hitting the wall, and felt it move. The texture under her hands wasn't stone anymore. It was flesh, cold, but pulsing. Then came the faint sound of footsteps behind her. Bare feet. Slow Chi turned, heart hammering, lantern sparking weakly to life. The tunnel was empty. Only the air moved, breathing softly, through the veins in the wall. Her radio crackled to life. Jonah's voice came through. "Doc, you have to listen. Don't go deeper." "They're not static," swallowed the rest, replaced by a rising hum. She held the recorder close. "Jonah, where are you?" But the voice that answered wasn't his. "He's part of the route now. So will you?" The walls began to glow, veins brightening in rapid pulses, like the chamber itself was waking up. The hum rose into a deep resonance that made her vision blur. She dropped the lantern and ran. The tunnel shifted around her, passages twisting into new shapes, the ground rippling under her boots. The exit light appeared ahead, faint and trembling. She burst through the entrance, fell into the cold night mud, gasping for air. The forest was silent again, dead silent. She looked down at her hands. The skin along her palms glowed faintly under the moonlight, the same vein pattern as the mineral. When she reached camp, the trench had caved in. The generator was gone. Only the recorder remained, sitting upright on the ground, its red light still blinking. She pressed play. The last thing it had captured was her own voice, distorted, deeper, layered with another voice beneath it. The Caldwell vein remembers. And now, so do you. The forest hummed once, then went still. She didn't remember walking back down the ridge. One moment, she was staring at the collapsed trench. The next, she was standing in the valley, where the fog never lifted, the recorder still humming faintly in her hand. The sound inside it wasn't static anymore. It was a pulse that matched her heartbeat exactly. Mara told herself she would drive to town at first light. File a report, call the university, leave the ridge forever. But when the sun rose, it came up wrong green gold instead of amber, light diffused, like it was passing through water. The trees leaned toward the vein's direction, their branches trembling. She realized the forest was breathing in rhythm with her pulse. She found Jonah's notebook wedged under a fallen branch. Every page was blank except the last, where someone had written in a child's hand, "It remembers through us." The ink shimmered faintly, the same mineral hue. By noon the valley began to hum again. Birds dropped from the air mid-flight, their bodies twitching as if strings were pulled beneath the soil. Mara packed her things but stopped when she saw movement near the collapsed trench. 3 figures, half buried in mud, standing perfectly still. Their faces were expressionless, skin patterned with the faint lines of the glowing mineral. One of them wore Jonah's jacket. She raised her camera, took a photo. The lens fogged instantly, the picture black. The ground pulsed once, then the figures were gone. Inside her tent, she played back the recorder. Beneath the steady heartbeat was another layer of sound, hundreds of overlapping whispers, forming a single phrase, "Follow the current to its heart." The old maps called the hollow system, the root corridor. Her grandfather's final note mentioned it too. Beneath the ridge lies the heart. The Caldwells keep the rhythm so the mountain does not wake angry. She should have left. Instead, she followed. The entrance opened where the stream disappeared into rock. She crawled through the narrow cut, lantern scraping the walls. The deeper she moved, the warmer it grew, the hum vibrating through her ribs. Then the tunnel opened into a vast chamber round, perfectly symmetrical, walls alive with faint luminescence. At its center rose a column of translucent stone, taller than any tree, slow light coursing through it like blood. Embedded within the surface were countless human shapes. Blurred but unmistakable faces turned upward, mouths open in silent song. Her voice shook as she spoke into the recorder. Primary chamber located. Structure appears. Organic. possibly calcified remains fused with mineral growth. The pulse quickened. She felt it under her skin, her palms glowing brighter. A low tone filled the air, resonant and harmonic. The figures within the stone began to move. One face pressed outward Jonas, his eyes opened. "You hear it too," he whispered through the surface. "It wants to remember." The column split, with a sound like cracking ice. Light poured out, flooding the chamber. Every carved figure exhaled at once, releasing a cloud of fine dust that drifted upward and coalesced into a human for only a second, then dissolving into threads of light that sank into the floor. Mara stumbled back, coughing, but the dust clung to her skin, seeping into her pores. Memories not her own flashed behind her eyes, miners sealing tunnels. Families chanting in darkness, generations offering themselves to keep the heart from starving. The Caldwell Line hadn't been cursed. They had volunteered. Each generation carried the pulse, so the mountain's mind would stay divided among them. Never whole enough to wake, but now the line was broken. Mara realized it with cold certainty. The last Caldwell had died decades ago, and she had reopened the vein. The ground quivered. The pulse became thunder. Veins of light raced through the walls, branching upward toward the surface. She tried to run, but the floor rose beneath her, lifting her toward the column. The stone melted into light and wrapped around her wrists. Voices filled her head, thousands of them pleading, warning, praising. The light burned through her eyes, and for a heartbeat she saw what lay beneath the ridge, a vast network of luminous tendrils stretching for miles, all connected to one colossal form curled deep in the mountain's core, a shape breathing in geological time. She screamed, but the sound joined the hum, blending perfectly. When rescuers came weeks later, they found only her recorder, buried in soft clay near the stream mouth. The audio was intact. The final 30 seconds contained a steady heartbeat and a woman's voice, calm and detached. The Caldwell vein no longer sleeps. The mountain remembers its name, and now it remembers ours. Then the hum faded into silence. That night, the entire ridge glowed faintly beneath the clouds. Locals said it was swamp gas, a trick of the moonlight. But anyone who stood long enough could feel a pulse underfoot, steady and patient, as if the earth itself had learned to breathe again. Asterisk. If you ever find yourself driving through the old Appalachian backroads at night, roll down your window and listen. That low hum you hear under the crickets isn't power lines, it's the mountain remembering. Some say it's the wind through hollow stone, others say it's the Caldwells, still keeping the rhythm alive so the rest of us can sleep. But every few decades, the sound grows louder, and when it does, something under the soil starts to stir, reaching for a new voice to carry its song. If you felt that pulse tonight, maybe it's already chosen you. Don't forget to follow for the next descent. The mountain has many names, and one of them might be yours.